What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In. As per usual, I'm your host, Mason Cameron, at PFF_Mace on Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta, at Vishaal_Gupta 95 on Twitter. I almost just killed myself because the show started too early and I was not ready for that. But that's okay. We keep it moving. And tonight, we are doing the big show. How are you doing? I hear it's nice and warm out there in the desert, unlike where here it's 1 degree. How are you living?
I'm living great. It was a crazy 60 degrees out today. I was out in shorts and I had a jacket on, and it was too hot for the jacket. T-shirt and shorts weather for the next week. It's pretty dope.
You guys are spoiled rotten out there. I have some friends out in California who told me that they have to take a jacket when it gets like below 65, and I'm sitting here like, dude, I'm in shorts at 60 degrees. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that is actually going to be the big theme for us tonight is weather. This is going to be a crazy weather week in the NFLV, and there's a lot of money-making opportunity, and I'm excited to break into it. And last night, for anybody who did not see, we did over underdogs with Von Moore. Go check it out in case you missed it. You can find that on our YouTube and our Twitch pages. And tonight, we're doing the main event where we're going over all of our picks for the week. In business as usual, first and foremost, we have some housekeeping to get out of the way. We did a nice little split as usual on our NFL versus piece this week. For anybody that does not know or isn't aware, me and V, we write the most interesting piece in the entire market on the entire internet over at importantnonsense.com. We pit ourselves against each other in a battle of wits, going directly head to head on the books to see who comes out on top. Comes out every Wednesday. Go check it out. You don't want to miss it. To get access to that and everything IN, you can go to our Patreon. There should be a link in the description below. If they want to stop, taking my description off. I swear they're conspiring against us, V, because I've changed the description on our Patreon link 150 times and it keeps going back. And I'm going to have to call somebody over there at YouTube. But anyway, on to more important things. We have a nice split this week because we've been going at it, V, and we had a couple of haymakers traded this past week. We had a couple of close games this week where we split 1-1. This season, we are neck and neck. 14-15-1 for myself, 15-14-1 for you. We are right there neck and neck. You are still killing it in the ATS. I'm taking the nod in the totals, and we are meeting in the middle right there. So last week, though, we went through the first game, Pittsburgh at Carolina. You were on the side of Carolina -2.5. I was on the side of Pittsburgh +2.5. Pittsburgh did end up covering 24-16. So what happened in that one, V, that you were seeing that, didn't quite work out the way that we might have thought it did?
For me in that game, it came down to the quarterback play. We talked about that a lot. For me, it was going to be Sam Darnold was just better than Mitch Trubisky. And, Trubisky had a solid game. He didn't turn the ball over, which is the key thing that we were highlighting. Can Trubisky take care of the ball? Because as soon as he starts throwing picks, puts the ball on the ground, whatever it is, Pittsburgh does not have the offensive firepower to kind of stay in the game at that point. They don't have that kind of margin of error where if you start turning the ball over where you're going to be able to compete. And he did the opposite. He not only took care of the ball, but they did an excellent job sustaining drives, sustaining very long drives. I'm sure a lot of people didn't watch the game. It wasn't a very exciting game. But if you did, the first drive of the second half for the Pittsburgh Steelers was, I believe, a 21-play, 11-minute drive that ended up in a touchdown. If you're going to do that and not turn the ball over, it's going to end up doing pretty well for you. Darnold wasn't terrible, but he also wasn't great. He also didn't turn the ball over, but he was not able to sustain the drives and go on, 10, 11-play drives to put points on the board. A lot of 3-and-outs, a lot of good pressure by the Steelers defense to, force punts and stuff like that. So I think that was the big difference. Pittsburgh sustained drives, Carolina could not.
And you could tell that at points, Carolina just looked scared to death to put the ball in his hands to make these big throws that when they need them, they almost run the ball to a detriment to their team sometimes. And it's tough to do that And, I mean, they're not giving up the ball, but they might as well with some of these 3 and outs. They're just as bad as some of these turnovers. But on to our second game of the slate last week. We had Atlanta at New Orleans. I was on the side of the over 43. You won on the side of the under 43. Atlanta 18, New Orleans 21. Now, this was another game that did not have a whole lot of highlights going on in it, but it did kind of play out like we thought, or at least like you did think. It was a very close game. It did come, within a handful of points of this total. But really what amounted to is that Desmond Ridder did not wow. The New Orleans offense is still middling at best. And even though both of these defenses are putrid in their own right, these offenses were just not stacked up enough to take advantage of it. Did you see anything else different in this game?
Well, it was a bit of a scary start. I think New Orleans scored touchdowns on both of their first 2 drives, including a Taysom Hill bomb to Rashid Shaheed. So it was definitely a little nerve-wracking to start the first quarter, but it really, did not do much else for the rest of the game. Both offenses were just stuck. I still don't know what's going on with New Orleans' rushing game. I think Kamara, I think the stat is he only has 3 touchdowns this year, and they all came in one game. It's just, I don't know what's going on with the rushing attack, and I think that's the big key. If you're going to have to throw in somebody like Dalton under center, you need to have some big-time playmakers helping him out, and if Kamara is not going to do that for you this year, that offense is just stuck. And then, Desmond Ridder, it is what it is. He's a rookie making his first start. He was, a second, third-round rookie this year. You can't have high expectations for a guy like that. I mean, it's not going to happen usually for these guys right away. It's going to take them some time, if they're going to develop at all. So not too surprising that their offense was not doing much either.
Yeah, absolutely. That opening sequence, though, was definitely, I was on my feet because I was like, easy over, baby.
Right.
But then it just became a slog. Just one of the, most uninteresting games through the final, 45 minutes of the game for sure. But anyway, so into our pick for this week, we are highlighting Philly at Dallas. And the reason we only took one this week, for anybody that did read along, is we have a lot of consensus this week, and it was just a single pick under the Christmas tree for you guys. But that's okay, because that means that you're going to have a lot of nice winners, because when we agree a lot of the times, that means that this is going to be a good week for us. Yeah. It's a lot of easy reads. The game that we are highlighting, though, like I said, Philly at Dallas, the total 46.5. This is a game in the Saturday late window. You're on the side of over 46.5. I am on the side of under 46.5. And you're also liking Philly +6 in this one. What are you seeing that gives you the confidence in the Gardner Minshew, the Bubba Minshew-led Eagles this week?
Yeah, obviously that's the number one story heading into this game is Minshew starting in place of Jalen Hurts. I highlighted in the piece kind of the line movement as a result of Minshew starting. The spread went from about +1.5. It fell all the way down to +6.5, I believe, at the lowest. And it's dropped now back down to +4.5. So it's been quite a bit of a wild line movement in terms of the spread. I was able to get on it at +6, which I feel is a very nice number. And the total, I believe, started out at 50, and then it fell to around 46, got up to 47, and kind of settled at 46.5. So the reason I still like Philly and the over in this game, though, is I just think the talent around Minshew and the talent on this Philadelphia offense is so good that even if there's a drop-off from Hurts to Minshew, it's not drastic enough for me to not still take Philly getting so many points and still taking a relatively low under for, two teams that are excellent offensive teams this season. The Eagles just racked up points left and right. They, had 30-plus points, I think, in 3 out of the last 4 games. They dominated the Packers. They dominated the Titans. They had a solid showing last week in Chicago with Jalen Hurts. It's just been, all on point for this Philly offense. And, they might not reach 30 points this week, but there's no reason to expect Minshew can't get, low to mid 20s in this game, 21, 24 points. A.J. Brown is still a monster. Devontae Smith has been excellent this season. They're getting Dallas Goedert back off the IR. He's going to be a key piece. And they have a solid rushing attack with their offensive line. Miles Sanders can still get it done when you're playing behind such a good offensive line. So I have no reservations that Philly is still going to be able to put up 20-plus points in this game. And they're going up against a Dallas defense that just has not been very good lately. I mean, they got torched last week by Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. If you take away that pick six in overtime, they still gave up 28 points in regulation. The week before, the Houston Texans had 23 points, and they were rotating quarterbacks, something we have not seen in the NFL level in like forever. I don't remember ever seeing that. That's a college thing, but Houston was doing that with Jeff Driscoll and Davis Mills, and it sort of worked. A bunch of guys had good games for the Houston Texans, so that's not a good sign for them. They'll be without Leighton Vander Esch. Micah Parsons is limited with some sort of illness. He'll probably still play, but he's not going to be 100%. He feels like he hasn't really been 100% for most of the season. And then on the flip side, there's also no worries about Dallas's offense. They continue to roll. They've scored like 3+ offensive touchdowns in a large number of games this season. It's been like a 7 or 8 game streak where they've scored 3+ offensive touchdowns. They've just been completely on fire. A lot of that has to do with Tony Pollard becoming their primary ball carrier. It just unlocks something in this offense. Dak has been very solid as well. I just don't see them all having trouble getting, into that 27, 28 point range, which should put this into a relatively easy over in my estimation.
Yeah, and usually I'd agree with you right there. But I think that when we look at some of these, my biggest hang up here is that both of these teams absolutely hate each other. They absolutely hate each other. And I know that that's kind of a hard thing to equate and to really quantify like what a divisional matchup means to a spread or to a point total. But I think that that's one of the reasons why, like you did highlight, this is kind of a lower number we would see for one of these two teams. I think that part of it is held by Minshew being added into the mix, and that's what dropped it from, I think it was like 49.5 down to this 46 here. And don't get me wrong, I love Bubba Minshew, love his style. And I get that he's thrown 41 to 14 touchdown interception ratio, but when you peel back the layers, there is a reason he's only started 2 games in the last 2 seasons. Since entering the league in 2019, per our friends at Pro Football Focus, he ranks 28th out of 33 passers in PFF pass grade, with passers that have at least 1,000 dropbacks. 22 starts, 31 turnover-worthy plays. So he might only have 14 interceptions, but he still does put the ball at risk. With this Dallas defense, I get that they've given up a bunch of yards recently, which is definitely alarming, especially with how we've seen some people on the back end play for them where they've had some busted coverages and some really messed assignments. And that can't happen with really good teams. But they still lead the league in takeaways. Philly is just right there behind them. I think that the defenses in this game are really, really strong, especially Philly, who is top 3 in scoring over the month of December. Both of these defenses still rank top 4 in EPA per play this month. So Dallas has, not been great, at least for yardage, but they have still been good in a points expected kind of, realm. They're still playing very efficiently on the defensive end. Dak and company have been beating up on kind of these subpar defenses. That's why they've been putting up these humongous numbers. And that just won't be the case with this Philly team. I see a lot of bad blood. Philly allows the fewest passing yards in the league since December 2. I think that it's going to be a slog. It's going to be a slugfest. And I'm glad that this game is being played in a dome and not outside in the snow and in the cold in Philly where, it can muck up the results, because we're going to get an actual winner right here. These teams hate each other. This division is in balance, and this game is going to go a long way to deciding who wins it. And not just that, but who might lock up one of the top seeds in the NFC. So I'm excited to watch it. It's about time, V, we picked a good game so that we can actually watch it and enjoy it when we make these picks, because a lot of them, we've definitely had some of the snooze fests. So, but anyway, so that does it for NFL versus for the week. And we actually have a bit of a crazy week here. And I wanted to highlight it because, We don't hit every single game every week. And so anybody that's watching, if you have a game that we're not highlighting, reach out to us in the Discord. We'll be happy to handicap it for you or give our take on it or what we're thinking. We do that all the time. We love to do that. But first and foremost, we're going to talk a little bit about the weather. The weather is going to be absolutely crazy this week. So just a little bit by the numbers. The forecast is absolutely insane. 8 games are to be played at or below freezing temperatures. 6 of those games are to be played with 10 plus mile per hour winds. And that's led to some of the lowest game totals I've ever seen in an NFL game. There are game totals here that are 32.5 points. You'd have JV football games that have more points, lines for more points in them. So this is going to be an interesting week, and it's definitely one that I'm highlighting. So just as a list for anybody, you're going to want to go check it out for sure. But just to list off a few of them that they're going to have. We have New Orleans, Cleveland. They're going to be snow, 36 mile per hour winds, 11 degrees. It's going to feel like negative 21 out. Buffalo, Chicago, same idea. Snow, 22 mile per hour winds. It's going to feel like 14. Houston, Tennessee, Cincinnati, New England, Seattle, KC. Seattle, KC is not quite as bad, especially for being in Kansas City this time of year. They're only going to have about 16 degrees. So that's more or less nice for Kansas City in December. So maybe it's not so bad. Atlanta, Baltimore, same idea, 14 mile per hour winds. It's going to feel like 8 degrees. Detroit, Carolina, and then another one, Las Vegas at Pittsburgh is going to be a cold one, 8 degrees, 16 mile per hour winds, 32 mile per hour gusts, snow showers. I know our guy Mike Manning is going to be at that one, so bundle up, Mike, and make sure you fill your flask for that one because it's going to be a cold one out there. So first off, we've highlighted a bunch of these games. I'm seeing a bunch of opportunities for unders. Are you at all swayed when you handicap any of these games for the weather? Because I know that, they drop some of these totals down, but even I still feel confident on some of these totals. Even if the weather was nice, I don't think some of these teams would hit some of these totals. Are you kind of in the same boat, or do you kind of look at it with more of a, kind of a arm's reach for the weather?
I think what you just said there is a key point. Even if the weather was good, some of these teams you would still take the under. I think the takeaway should be that bad offenses are going to be just exponentially worse when it comes to this bad weather. If teams can't move the ball when it's good weather and they're playing in a dome or whatever it is, how can you possibly expect them to move the ball when the weather is going to be just downright awful? So that's the key. There's a lot of these games are going to be involving 2 bad teams with bad offenses. So that's why it makes a ton of sense to take the under. A couple of these games, though, do feature some solid offenses like Buffalo and Kansas City. In those instances, with the number dropping slightly, it might be a good chance to take the over because those teams are still explosive enough where just a couple plays here and there can get you very close to that, that total number. And you just it's not going to be as difficult to hit the over because it dropped by a few points. So I think if you're looking at bad offenses, feel free to take the under, continue to take the under. It should be easier to get that number. But if the offenses are good and the number drops, that's just better value for you because they just still be able to put up enough explosive plays to get there.
More value because it's exactly what we saw this past week when Buffalo and Miami faced off, and it's absolutely frigid and there's snow falling and it's cold out there and they're putting freaking points on the board, and we love to see it. So you can never really know for sure. But one of these games that I'm definitely highlighting in the Saturday early slate is New Orleans at Cleveland. And goodness gracious, this has got to be one of the nastiest forecasts I've seen for an NFL game in well over a decade, and maybe multiple. I don't know. One of the old heads will have to go back and check on that. But I'm liking the under 32.5 here, even though this is easily the lowest total we've seen here all year and probably the lowest total we've seen in a number of years. It's going to be 11 degrees. It's going to feel like negative 21 degrees out, 36 mile per hour wind, 63 mile per hour gusts. That's insane. They're going to have like hurricane level winds in this snowstorm, and they're going to have blowing snow. And if that weren't bad enough, these teams are bad offenses, like you just stated. Both these teams rank bottom third of the league in points per game. And Watson just has not equated to a massive jump at quarterback play for the Browns. While the Saints have been, hit or miss, like we've talked about with Andy Dalton, they are just not consistent enough to really put up the number of points that they're going to need in this one, especially when you think about that's a dome team. This is going to be nasty weather. When you look at Watson played multiple seasons in Houston, Texas, where they also play in a dome and have nice weather. He's not going to be comfortable either. This is not going to be a great turnout for either of these teams. I think that they could have dropped this thing down to like 28 points and you'd still have to consider the under there. I don't see a lot going on. I'm seeing like a 13-3 game at best in this one. Are you seeing anything else with this type of matchup? It's just been so disappointing to see the Cleveland Browns kind of shoot themselves in the foot over this, type of trade when frankly, maybe they should go back to Jacoby Brissett because at least they can sleep at night or something, because this has not gone well for them and they look bad doing it.
Yeah, no, it's been downright awful. I mean, they had 13 points last week. They had some very low number the week before. I can't even remember. It's just not been a good 3-game start for Watson and Cleveland. This game reminds me of the game last year where Las Vegas went to Cleveland on the road. It was maybe earlier in the season, but it was terrible weather conditions in that game too, high winds, and nobody could throw the ball at all. That one ended at 10-7, I believe. Very low scoring game. And it should probably be the same thing here. I mean, you're not even going to be able to kick field goals with that kind of high wind gusts going around. So I just don't see how anything's going to happen for either team. The Saints don't have Olave or Jarvis Landry. I don't know who you're throwing the ball to. Neither team, or the Saints are definitely not running the ball very well. Nick Chubb hasn't run the ball as well as he was early in the season. And then, we highlighted this on over underdogs last night. I took the lower on Kareem Hunt's total yardage. I think you would be fine taking the lower on everybody's yardage. I mean, it's already set very low. Andy Dalton's yardage total is like 150. So is Deshaun Watson's. It's like nobody's expecting anything in this game. There's not going to be yardage. There's not going to be points. It makes total sense to stick the under on the total in this game.
I'm going to avoid watching this one too, because like I've said, I just get cold watching people be out in the cold, and I'm not going to be subjecting myself to that, let alone having to watch people subject themselves to it. But anyway, and another one that we're highlighting for really a lot of the same reasons, we keep coming back to it. If they're bad when the weather's nice, they're not going to be just like better or as bad when the weather is this shitty out. And that's how it's going to be when Atlanta takes on Baltimore in the Saturday early window. And I'm liking the under 35.5 here. You actually got this at under 37.5 earlier in the week, which just highlights everybody. Make sure you're shopping early and often, because these things like this weather forecast was something we kind of foresaw coming for a number of days. It's not just like it was dropped on our doorstep. We kind of knew that the weather might be inclemental for at least the first couple days of the week. And this shows that how you can gain extra value from shopping early before everybody gets in on stuff. You're also liking Atlanta at plus 7.5 here. The weather, like we talked about a little bit before, it's looking like it's gonna feel like 8 degrees out, 14 mile per hour wind, 30 mile per hour gusts. So not quite as bad as the last game, but still not very good. And when you look at it, you have Desmond Ridder versus Tyler Huntley.
Yeah,
that's really all you need to know. Are you seeing anything else from this game that backs that up, or anything else you're seeing differently?
Yeah, so this was the game I highlighted on our early line value pick this week. I took Atlanta plus 7.5, and I had a feeling that this game would drop below a touchdown. It is currently sitting at 6.5 in favor of Baltimore. And, straight up honesty, that's still way too high. I mean, one of the main things I talked about was 7.5 point spread. I don't even know if Baltimore can score 7 points. They've been just atrocious offensively with Tyler Huntley under center. In their last 2 games where Tyler Huntley started and finished the game, they scored 16 points and then 3 points last week in Cleveland. He's been downright awful. Now he has a right shoulder injury. I just don't even know like how he's going to play. He might not play a full game in this one. You might have to go to the third string guy in Anthony Brown. This is going to be a terrible offensive showing for Baltimore. I don't see how they're going to be able to do anything. And then, we all know Atlanta's deficiencies. We talked about that at the top of the show. It's not an indictment on Desmond Ridder or anything like that. Again, he's just a rookie. He doesn't have the experience. We'll see how he progresses. But as of right now, he just doesn't have the, experience or, the know-how of how to play NFL quarterback right now. So they're just not going to put up enough points. It's going to be too much running the football for them to be able to hit this number. I don't even know how. I can't do the math in my head to figure out how they get to 35, 36 points in this game. It really doesn't make sense to me. In terms of the spread, I definitely think Atlanta can cover. They might even win this game outright. Marcus Peters and Calais Campbell are going to be out for Baltimore. Atlanta's relatively healthy. They did lose Craig Huntley last week, but that just allows more room for Tyler Algier to get more touches. And he was fantastic last week. He had a really solid game. Logan highlighted this in our Vegas Love Hate today, so go check that one out. He's all over Tyler Algier this week, and it makes a ton of sense. He's getting the bulk of the touches for Atlanta, and that's going to be their primary, focus this week. But it's not going to lead to points or anything like that in terms of hitting the total, but it'll be enough to cover the spread.
Yeah, understandable, especially when you get it, like we keep talking about, these key numbers of this is why you shop, early, because you get these key numbers when you can get it at 7.5 versus the 6.5 that it is right now. That gives you that extra, value of the hook over the touchdown. These key numbers are where these games end most often, and that's why you see so many lines at the 6, 7, at the 3 line. It just makes so much more sense. And and like you said perfectly, the Ravens have not proven to be able to cover 7 against anybody, even with Lamar at a lot of times this season. How are they supposed to expect to do that with Tyler Huntley and the weather? It's just not a great situation here. I'm definitely on board with that as well. Man, I really wish that Atlanta could just reharness that power against the spread they had early on in the season, because they were darlings. So then into another snow game here. We're looking at the Saturday night game. We have Vegas at Pittsburgh. We talked a little bit about this one. This one's probably the second ugliest game out here. It's going to feel like -14. It's going to have 16-mile-per-hour wind, up to 32-mile-per-hour gusts with snow. Again, our prayers go out to our guy Mike Manning. Stay warm out there. And I'm liking the under 38.5. And this is actually one of the higher totals for one of these bad weather games, but it has, like I just said, one of the nastier forecasts with snow. Pickett is in line to return if he clears concussion protocol, which will be an interesting note moving forward, because as you've highlighted specifically, this Steelers team is much better with Kenny Pickett. He is still conservative, but he gives this offense a floor, a very consistent floor that he consistently hits every single time he goes out there. So we like that, but I still think that with the weather conditions, he's still a young quarterback, quote unquote, his small hands or whatever. Might have a little bit of trouble holding onto the ball with a little bit of wetness. But for me, the biggest thing is the Raiders are just way too inconsistent, and especially on the road.
Yeah,
I don't see them having any issue with the Pittsburgh defense holding them down at home. Watt and company have been really good since his return. They keep this team in games, and they showed out last week how they can play. And even when they don't make some of the biggest splash plays, they're holding teams down, and they're really looking good. I see a easy under here, and a lot of it's because of the weather. This is the only game that might be a little bit more in question because Vegas can put points up at times, but we'll just see which Vegas is going to come out here, because they're very much the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde or the guys with the Lions that work out there in Vegas. I don't even remember. But are you seeing anything else from this one, V, that I didn't highlight here?
No, that makes sense to me. Pittsburgh's defense has been very, very good in the last month or so. I think they have allowed 20 or fewer points in like 4 or 5 straight games, and that's with relatively decent weather or playing in a dome. Now, if you're going to add in the weather conditions against the Raiders' offense that you said very well, very inconsistent, that makes total sense. The Raiders are healthier now. They did get Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow back last week, but I don't know if that's going to be enough of a difference in this game with these conditions to hit the over. I think under makes sense, and I would probably stay away from the spread. It's a little tough to figure out who's going to come out on top in this one.
Yeah, that's a bit of a weird draw. The money line might be where you go if you have a better read on it, but like you just said, I don't really have much of a read on it either, other than that this weather is going to be ugly, and both of these offenses have been inconsistent at best. So
yeah,
I'm right there with you. But here we actually head into a weather game that you actually have a pretty positive beat on for an over here, and it looks like a lot of the public is tailing you here at 65% of the picks on Betting Pros here are right there with you. And we are highlighting Buffalo at Chicago. This is in the Saturday morning slate or the Saturday early slate. You're liking over 40.5. The weather for this one. This is also a pretty ugly one. It's going to feel like -14 out. 22 mile per hour winds, 38 mile per hour gusts. It is going to have blowing snow. What are you seeing when you see this matchup play out?
Yeah, I'm just thinking Buffalo's offense is just too good that I think that the weather is not going to affect them too much. It's going to be a little bit. That's why the total is down to 40. Otherwise, this would be in the high 40s, given how explosive Buffalo's offense is. But the key here is Chicago's defense is not good. They've allowed the third most points in the league this year, and they just lost their top cornerback, Jalen Johnson, today. He got placed on IR, so his season's done. If they don't have Jalen Johnson, there's no way they're going to stop Stephon Diggs. He's going to have a monster game. If I had known this, if this news had come out yesterday, I would have definitely taken the higher on Stephon Diggs' yardage prop on over underdogs. I think it was only 66.5. It should probably be closer to 90 now with Jalen Johnson out. That's, how much of a difference it's going to make in the secondary. They don't have anybody to stop him. So it's only going to take a few explosive plays for Buffalo to get to kind of get most of this total on their own. I think they can get to that 27, 28 point mark relatively easily against this Buffalo defense. And then you just need Justin Fields to make magic a couple times, get to 14, 17 points for Chicago, and you should have a pretty simple over. It's not going to be pretty because of the weather, but there's still enough explosiveness for both teams where it shouldn't be too difficult to hit.
This is the one that you highlighted perfectly with when the points get knocked off because of weather. When you have some decent offenses, or even in the Bears case, a really, really bad defense, that's just going to get worse. These are opportunities that give you that extended value. 100%. I'm right there with you. 40.5 is a number that, Buffalo could fuck around and get themselves. So
it's possible.
Yeah, we'll see. Josh Allen, man's bred for the winter.
Yeah, that's why you have that rocket arm in Buffalo. It's for moments like this.
Yeah, for moments like this. I bet you sometimes he wishes he played in LA, though.
I'm sure.
But anyway, so that's kind of it for the really, really cold game. So we do have some more weather games. This one specifically, Detroit at Carolina, is going to have a little bit of inclement weather, but nothing is near as bad as some of those games that we just highlighted. So for reference, you should kind of, keep an eye on the weather in case it does take a dip, but these ones shouldn't be so detrimental to some of your scores. And they're more kind of straightforward handicaps for sure. And like I did just allude to, we are taking Detroit at Carolina. Wow, I just realized that Detroit has a whopping 93% of the consensus. You love to see it. Go Lions. The Lions are everybody's favorite team right now. I mean, what can you say? Everybody loves an underdog story. I want Jared Goff to win the MVP now.
No, let's not go that far.
But it's just an amazing thing to watch how well they've done. I can't wait to see them continue to move forward with this team and see how far this team can go. I'm liking them at -3. You got them at -2.5 early in the week. makes all the sense in the world. What I was seeing is over the last 3, I think Carolina is just a little bit, they might have a better reputation than they've actually put out. Over the last 3, they ranked 29th in EPA per dropback, 21st in dropback success rate. And Goff has just been playing out of his mind. We highlighted it last night when we were on Over Underdogs, and I'm right there still. I get that the weather is going to play a bit of a factor for a dome team like Detroit, but it really shouldn't sway this line so much that, they can't cover a field goal against a significantly worse team, in my opinion, at least offensively, as we've highlighted with some of Sam Darnold and their, Carolina's penchant to just run the ball, even when it might hurt them or even when the game doesn't dictate that. What are you seeing when you see this matchup between a couple of cats out there in the cold with the Lions and the Panthers?
Yeah, it's just a little surprising that this line has not moved past the 3, given how much action there is right now on Detroit. It's a little concerning. Maybe there's just something we're not catching, something the sharps know that we don't. But it's also possible it could turn out just like last night's game, where despite Trevor Lawrence being significantly better than Zach Wilson, the Jets were 2.5-point favorites, or maybe it was 1.5, 2-point favorites. But they were favored in that game for whatever reason. And then after that game was over, everybody's asking themselves, why in the world would Zach Wilson be favored over Trevor Lawrence? Kind of feels like the same thing here. Why is Jared Goff only a 2.5, 3-point favorite over Sam Darnold? Doesn't make a ton of sense. Carolina's defense has had moments, but I think as we saw last week, they weren't able to do anything against Mr. Trubisky. They're not going to be able to do anything against Jared Goff. This offense is fully healthy with Jameson Williams coming back. There's just too much talent. Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds, all the guys in the backfield with DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams. There's just no holes or gaps to be able to stop this offense. So I think Detroit's not going to have very many problems putting up points. And then Carolina's offense is just not explosive enough to keep up with them. There'll be a couple of nice plays with Darnold to DJ Moore, but you can't expect very much else. This feels like a pretty easy 24-14 type game for Detroit to win by double digits.
Yeah. The 3 doesn't make any sense because that means on a neutral field,
it's like a pick 'em almost.
Yeah, it's a pick 'em. That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not falling for it. I don't think anybody in the nation's falling for it. And
they have like the most percentage of tickets and most money on them according to all the sports books right now.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Like you said, maybe Oddsmakers know that Sam Darnold, sold his soul to the Grinch for, some Christmas miracle, but this just seems like an outwardly incorrect line, and I have a feeling it's going to cost a number of sportsbooks money.
Yeah, probably.
Anyway, and into another game with some decently cold weather, but like I said, KC this time of year is absolutely frigid. I don't think that this really falls under one of those type of games. This is kind of normal December weather for them, but it is still decently chilly out there. So it is something to monitor if the weather does fall off, a cliff. But something that I'm liking here when we highlight Seattle at KC is I'm liking Seattle plus 9.5. This is another one that I highlighted in our opening line values piece. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense for me. I get it. Seattle hasn't covered a game since early November, but neither has KC. And the difference is some of those games that Seattle's not covering are games as favorites, where early on in the season, they weren't favorites for very many games, if any, but they were definitely covering as dogs and winning outright. And then they just weren't really coming up and covering the spread when they needed to lay points. And that ended up being kind of the difference in why they're not covering. KC's not anywhere near that. KC's favored in almost every game they play. They're favored by quite a bit, and they are just not covering these games. We saw it just a few weeks ago, this past week, when they're a 14-point favorite against the Texans at 1-12-1, and the Texans are coming out and, pushing them to the brink. Now, if something like that's going to happen, that's all we need to know when we look at KC having the second worst against the spread record in the league at 4-9-1. So when I see that, I'm going to take the points because I get it. KC on paper is a significantly better team than the Seahawks, who at times show holes on their offensive line with these young tackles who sometimes can't get their balls to the playmakers, but still have a lot of talent, are still playing good enough. It looks like it's even moved up to 10. How is this a 10-point spread? I don't understand what games we're watching where the tickets and the money are still going into Seattle and they're still giving them points. I like Mahomes as much as the next guy, but like, let's understand that Geno's not a wash. Geno can come out here, and giving Geno 10 points is going to be too many. And that's actually something that you highlighted in our over underdogs piece last night when you took the higher on 1.5 passing touchdowns for Geno. And guess what? The book, at least underdogs, immediately took it down because they knew that that is just too easy for a team that has this type of talent, that can play this well offensively, and who actually plays above average defense. I mean, KC's going to get whatever they want, but Seattle's not exactly going to make it easy on them. So that's where I'm sitting with this one. V, are you seeing anything else that I don't see with this one?
No, I'm in agreement. I'm definitely in agreement with you on Seattle covering. I was able to get them at +10 this week. I also like the over 48.5 in this game. I think there's going to be a ton of points. You just mentioned it. I love the Geno Smith higher than 1.5 passing touchdowns prop. Kansas City's defense, especially their secondary, has not played well. They've given up the most passing touchdowns in the league this year at 30. They allow the second highest passer rating to opposing quarterbacks. I don't think there's going to be too much trouble for Seattle to score points in this game. And whether it's in regulation, like it's normal game time or it's garbage time, Seattle's going to put up probably in the low to mid 20s. I don't think there's going to be much trouble. And then on the other side, I think Kansas City is also not going to have any trouble. They've shown that Mahomes is just, he's that guy. He's probably going to win MVP again this year. He's not going to have very much trouble putting up points in this one. Safety Ryan Neal is out for the Seahawks this week, so it could be a big Travis Kelce day for him up the middle. Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon have become a fantastic running back duo for the Chiefs. And then you still have guys like Juju and, Marcus Valdes-Scantling who will make a couple plays here and there. So I see a lot of points, but I think Seattle's offense is good enough to cover this, whether it's a backdoor cover or they're just in the game the entire time. Regardless, Seattle should be able to cover 10 or 9.5, whatever it is. And I think both teams should be able to score in the mid to high 20s at a minimum.
Yeah, and we've hit on this a number of times this year on this show, is that when you expect a type of boat race or a shootout per se for a couple of offenses, it is, pretty good of an idea to go ahead and take the points, especially when they exceed 10 like this. I don't see very many situations where KC can outpace the Seahawks so bad. It might even be worse if KC comes out to a big lead and then leaves, Geno all the opportunity to hit this backdoor cover, because that's exactly what he'll do with giving too much slack and giving too much leash. So I think that he's definitely a good play there. And like you said, we highlighted that 1.5 passing touchdowns. That's going to be a huge value right there. You could even go look for some of the alternate lines on 2.5 and see what you might get out. You might get some great value.
Also to note, before we switch games, Tyler Lockett is out in this game with a hand injury. He's not going to play, but Marquise Goodwin has been very, very good this year. Probably the best year of his career so far. So I don't expect it to be too much of a downfall for the Seahawks offense.
Yeah, absolutely. He has had quite the resurgence. You love to see it, so for sure. And then into our next game on the slate. This is another one that I'm highlighting by myself. Gosh, the Packers sure are lucky when all this weather's coming in and they're like, we're headed to Miami, baby. So I'm sure that Rodgers and company are very happy here. I'm not going to lie, though. I am shocked that this money has lined up as it has, with about 50-50 here. But I think that the hook is playing a big part in this one for sure at 3 in the hook, where it is currently. I actually even took it way lower at 4.5 for Miami, and I'm still comfortable with that. I'm definitely going to get in on it more at 3.5. I don't understand why odds makers keep fading this Miami team. They came out and proved last week that they can take on anybody in the league. And if you give them, an inch, they're going to take a mile because they have that type of offense that is just too fast, that can just put up points in spurts, and you cannot sleep on. And anytime that happens, I'm comfortable taking them against almost anybody. Ben highlighted this game specifically in his piece on exotics this week, the jungle, and it makes a lot of sense. The Packers have just not been great defensively.
No.
It doesn't make a ton of sense how they're going to be able to keep pace with an offense that's putting up 30-plus points every other week. I don't see it. Even in weather last week, some of the worst weather we've seen against a good defense like Buffalo, they came out and put points on the board when not a lot of people expected it. And I'm right here thinking now they're back at home. They're going to play a team in Green Bay that hasn't really been terribly great offensively. Now I know Christian Watkins kind of exploded there for a few weeks, but he's come back down to earth. With him coming back down to earth, they're not getting much production at wide receiver. They aren't really getting the production at running back that they were early on in the season. And now they're going to have to face a Miami team that's going to boat race them in 80-degree weather. Like, I don't see this ending out very well for Green Bay, except for the fact that they get to avoid snow for Christmas. Are you seeing anything else with this one? Or are you shocked at how odds makers are treating the Dolphins over the last handful of weeks?
Well, I think it opened up at probably around the right number, whether it was 4.5, maybe 5 points, but it seems like bettors are kind of just coming in droves and betting the Packers, moving this down to 3.5, which is a little surprising. I think maybe last week people saw that they, kind of won in a blowout fashion and maybe they're back to their normal ways. But if we're being honest, if the Rams were healthy with Stafford and Cooper Kupp, they're probably winning that game. Baker had enough good moments in that game where it should not make you very confident in this Packers defense. They still are not doing enough given the talent that they have. And Rodgers is also just not playing very well. That interception last week was bad, whether that was on him or whether the receiver didn't run the proper route. That's a throw that these guys have never missed prior to this season. Those are automatic touchdowns. As a guy who has had to play him twice every year, I know for a fact that's a touchdown every single time prior to the season. But it's no longer that way anymore. This offense is just not clicking the way it has been in the past. So I agree. It's going to be hard for them to keep up with the Dolphins. I mean, they're going to have to go punch for punch with them, and I don't think that they've proven that they can do that. So the key for the Packers, if they're going to want to stay in this one, is that their defense is going to have to find a way to step up and kind of get some takeaways or get some stops against this Miami offense. And I'm just not confident enough in that to be able to bet the Packers in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is kind of a changing of the guard game because, like you just stated, Rodgers has not been that good. Tua, he's been much better. He's been significantly improved. Now, they did have a bit of a spurt. We loved to highlight that in games that Tua starting to finish, they were winning all of them. They were covering pretty much all of them. They had a little bit of a skid a couple weeks ago that went. But against Buffalo, I think they kind of proved
they look back to normal for them.
We're back to normal. We're okay. We're going to be all right. And they're going to be one of the toughest teams come playoff time. And that's kind of how the Packers used to be. Yeah. We're going to beat you offensively. Our defense might play well, might not. I mean, eventually their defense got really good. But for a number of years, that's how the Packers hung their hat. And I see this as a changing of the guard game where that's what the Dolphins are doing now. This isn't going to be a very close one. I think that this is a 10-point game, a touchdown game, and it's just not that close for them. It's actually sad, V, because when you start to think about it, this is one of the last handful of times we're probably going to see Rodgers.
This is an amazing moment. What do you mean sad? It's the greatest thing. Best Christmas present you could ask for. Wake up early on Sunday.
Maybe you're right.
Watch the Packers get demolished.
Watch the Packers get demolished. Spoken like a true Bears fan. We love to see Oh, goodness. So, on to our last game of the slate. We are highlighting the last game of the week. To think that they're playing football on Thursday, on Saturday, on Sunday, and on Monday is insane to think. Unfortunately, for Monday, though, we all get to watch the Chargers take on the Colts. And V, you are on the under 46.5 here. It makes all the sense in the world to me. Why don't you tell all the folks at home why you're highlighting this one?
Another garbage Monday night game. Not going to be fun.
Primetime's just not like it used to be.
No, it's just not. Yeah, Indy's starting Nick Foles. If you guys didn't hear, I'm sure it kind of got swept under the rug because there's a lot of other news this week. But Nick Foles is starting this week. This is going to be his first start this season, and it's not going to go very well because this team stinks. Jonathan Taylor is out, so it's going to be Zach Moss and Deion Jackson, whatever that means. Don't get fooled by what Indy did last week in the first half. All of those points pretty much came on a defensive pick six and a special teams block punt. If you look at their offense, they did absolutely nothing, despite having great field position all day because of their defense.
In a game that they literally go into overtime, I can't hit an over on Michael Pittman 66 yards. 66 yards, and I can't hit an over on that. I was sick after that. Be absolutely sick. You're 100% right.
Yeah, this is terrible. I don't expect much better things out of Nick Foles as much as we enjoy talking about him and what he did in that playoff run with the Eagles. He's just not the same guy anymore. And then the other side, the Chargers offense has not been great. I mean, they're getting healthier and they're getting better, but it's not really translating into that many points. They're averaging just a little bit more than 22 points per game this season, but only 20 points per game over their last 3 games. So it's not going to be they're not putting up 30 points a week. They're not that kind of offense right now. They're, low 20s usually. Good thing for them, though, is that their defense is finally starting to play a little bit better. In their last 2 games, they've allowed a total of 31 points. Probably not great offenses that they played against. Last week was the Titans. But it's going to be the same thing this week. The Colts are not a good offense, so I don't think they're going to have much trouble shutting them down. So this should be a relatively low-scoring game, maybe like a 24-14 type game again.
Yeah, and a positive is that they're doing it against somebody they should be doing it against. For a while, for a long time, they weren't even doing that. Like, they were getting blown out by offenses that they shouldn't be. And, putting anything together with the type of talent they have on the ball is going to go a long way for sure. And I mean, you said it perfectly. Indy is doing the proverbial 1-2-3 Cancun right now.
I mean, that was the craziest thing last week, though. I woke up late. I woke up at halftime of that game. I checked the score because I just needed to see what's going on fantasy-wise. I had some bets on that game. And, man, if you could have seen my face when I saw 33-0, that was just wild. But, yeah, that's never happening again for them. This team stinks.
It makes no sense. I'm not going to lie. I didn't watch it either. And I come back. I'm keeping tabs on the scores because I got the same thing. I got my little Google notifications open with all the live scores running on my phone so I can always see them no matter what I'm doing. And I'm looking at it, and I look back down, I look back down, I look back down, and the score is just up. And I'm like, how did this happen? How did this game go to overtime like this? That is obscene. But that does it for us in week 16. Everybody, make sure you bundle up and stay warm out there because it is going to be a cold one. Have a great holiday. We will see you guys again next week. Hug your families for us. Like I said, back same time next week. Check out Over Underdogs at halftime of TNF. You can also check out yesterday's over on the YouTube and on our Twitch and on our Facebook. Check out all of the IN betting team's work over at importantnonsense.com. Guys, we highlight that stuff in here, not because we're trying to plug our guys. We highlight that stuff because they're smart and they see things that we don't see, and they highlight it perfectly in those pieces and give you all the breakdowns you want. So definitely go check those out. And in order to get access to those, you can join our Patreon. That also gets you access to our Discord. That's how you get our picks. That's how you get our articles, all that good stuff. we're making a ton of money over there. If you come in and shout at us, I know that our picks are going to pay for your subscription into our Patreon. So it pays for itself. You're going to love it. And shop.importantnonsense.com, promo code LOCK. It is already Christmas. It's just around the corner, but you can still get our Christmas collection for next year. So you're all set and ready. Hopefully, the Russell Wilson burning the turkey is not going to be a consistent thing for next year. So it'll be a collector's item. You're going to want to get it now. Yeah, so that about does it. V, do you have any parting words for the people at home?
Happy holidays to everybody. I hope you guys enjoy your time off, whatever you guys are doing with your families, and enjoy the football this weekend. Remember, games tomorrow, I think less than 16 hours before first kickoff. So enjoy a full Saturday of football.
Games are right around the corner. I can't wait for it. It's going to be a great holiday. And hug your family for me, buddy. I can't wait to, get out there with you and, shoot the shit and get where it's not 1 degree out. But until then, I have to freeze. And until next time, everybody, good luck. Godspeed.